Thank you for listening to this Podcast One production, available on Apple Podcasts and Podcast One.
You all know that I can't believe Raymond has gifts to get on Mother's Day, both for his mother and the beautiful Rebecca. And that's coming up May 12th. So if you haven't gotten Mom something special yet, you have to do it. And you never go wrong with great flowers. You just never do. They always brighten up someone's day, especially when they come from, and I love this, FromYouFlowers.com. It has a fantastic deal right now, just for my podcast listeners. So you go to FromYouFlowers.com/Laura, and you can send a dozen mixed roses for just $19.99, or if you need to make a really great impression, just upgrade to 2 mixed dozen roses and add a free vase for just $10 more. So that's $29.99 for a big arrangement, 24 roses, a free vase, delivered in time for all the special moms on your list this Mother's Day. Again, FromYouFlowers.com/Laura. And you can go there. You'll see that there's guaranteed freshness, on-time delivery from a company that was awarded the highest customer satisfaction with online flower retailers in 2019 by the esteemed J.D. Power. Again, very easy. Mother's Day, do the right thing. FromYouFlowers.com/Laura.
Your life, your country. You're listening to the Laura Ingraham Podcast.
Welcome to the Best of the Laura Ingraham Podcast. Thanks for listening. There's so many memorable guests and unforgettable moments from both radio over the years, conversations with my most incredibly scintillating guests, all unforgettable. Enjoy it here on the Laura Ingraham Podcast. Gordon Chang is with us, and Gordon's an expert in all things China, and he's probably listening to me going, what did I get myself into with this podcast today? Gordon, how are you?
I'm fine, Laura, and what did I get myself into?
Gordon, do you agree with me at movies, though? I mean, I know we're going to talk about China, but the movie experience isn't, I mean, I don't care if I sound like an old curmudgeon. The movies are terrible in general, and the experience is not a pleasant one in the theater, period.
Yeah, I have not been to a theater in about 7-8 years, maybe a decade.
What's there to see? I mean, you're never going to see anything critical of China in a movie. When's that big biopic of Mao coming out? What Mao really did? I think that's ever going to be made? I don't think so.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's certainly not going to be made while the People's Republic is in existence.
No, Gordon, tell us about what we should be thinking as a people about our interaction, or our business interaction, our academic interaction with China, given the mass oppression of minorities, of religious people, of people across the spectrum, anyone who wants a modicum of freedom, destroying churches as we just talked about, the big cathedral just razed by the Chinese this week. What should our relationship really be as a free nation with a totalitarian nation?
I agree with you, Laura. We need to disengage from China, and there's so many different reasons. So first of all, China is committing crimes against humanity in its northwest, what they call Xinjiang, and what the Uyghurs, the inhabitants there, call East Turkestan. They're building concentration camps. There's maybe more than 1 million people in them. And people are dying in these camps in not inconsiderable numbers. And we know that because the Chinese are building crematoria to dispose of the corpses. Now, these camps are now starting to appear in Tibet, and is part of an intensified crackdown on religion across China. And they're not only cracking down on Christianity, which they've done from time to time, but for the first time that I can remember, they're also going against Buddhists, which they consider to be a local religion. So really what we're seeing under Xi Jinping is this relentless campaign against people of faith.
Religious cleansing, ethnic cleansing, ethnic and religious cleansing, right? That's what it is.
Definitely. As the Dalai Lama said, there's cultural genocide, but because it's also connected with the killing of people, this reminds us of what happened during the Third Reich.
So this could be this. I mean, I predict that we will look back on this period like we look back on the period where people were working with the Germans. I mean, but worse, much worse. It'll ultimately, if things can continue as they're continuing, we may find that it ends up the carnage is worse. I mean, Mao killed how many? 60 million people?
Something like that.
Forward, yeah. And now this continuation, but it's the veneer of, oh, it's state-run capitalism. Oh, it's a veneer. Oh, no, we're working with the Catholic Church and this Pope. We're working collaboratively. The biggest joke ever with Francis working with the Chi-Coms. That was one of the biggest travesties the Catholic Church has been involved with, and that's saying something.
Yeah, this agreement between Pope Francis and the Chinese Communist Party is working out very badly for Catholicism. And I think that what's going to happen is that people of Christian faith in China are going to migrate from Catholicism to the underground Protestant churches, because these underground Protestant congregations are growing like wildfire. The Communist Party has no answer to them, and the party is mortally afraid of them because they see in the Protestants today what they were in the 1920s. They did have that religious fervor. The Communist Party doesn't have it anymore, and they know they have no answer to religion, and particularly underground Protestant congregations.
Well, so right now, how are we getting information out of China when they have all of the restrictions on internet and so forth? How are we able to monitor this? By satellite technology?
Well, on a number of different ways. Talking about religion, for instance, there are a number of Americans who go in and work with and are part of those Christian congregations. So we learn about it that way as they bring in Bibles and as they bring out information. And, of course, the Chinese are tourists. We learn a fair amount from Chinese tourists, including the one at Mar-a-Lago, by the way. But also,
yeah, tell us about that. Tell us about what you think. What's your theory there?
Yeah, many people talk about her name, Zhang Yujing. Her tradecraft was awful, but we got to remember that the Chinese use the 1,000 grains of sand approach to intelligence collection, which means that they see every Chinese tourist, student, business person as a collector of information, and they interview them and expect them to bring stuff back. According to the 2017 National Intelligence Law, every Chinese party must spy on behalf of the government if demanded. So, I think that she was probably one of these grains of sand people who were there to fulfill what she was told was her duty to the Chinese state.
And this was the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo. A big testimony yesterday. It didn't get a lot of coverage because everyone's focused on Bill Barr. This is as important, if not ultimately far more important, than what Bill Barr said about spying on political adversaries within the United States. Let's listen.
If you've seen the stories of this app that's being used, it's the Little Red Book, Mao's Little Red Book brought to your iPhone, where they have people put in their phone numbers and their names, and they get points for answering questions about Xi's policies. It's really quite something.
Well, what do we know about this? Well, according to reports, schools, businesses, and government offices are all using these apps. It's like a point system. And it incentivizes people, and then, of course, it punishes people who don't accumulate enough of these social credit points. People are ranked, and ideological intimidation is used as this app is tracked. And some employers reportedly are forcing their staff to send them screenshots of their scores every day. Reminds me, I say it again, I just said it earlier, but I lived in the Soviet Union. This is exactly what they did in the Soviet Union. Exactly, but I was there when I lived there, they didn't have the internet. But they were keeping logs on apartment building floors. There was a woman who sat at every apartment building floor or hotel, and she was called the dejurnaya. And the dejurnaya would keep in track of your comings and goings, who you spoke to, how long you lingered in the hallway. There was a record kept, but just now we have the internet, so it's much easier for them to track people. Gordon Chang, your reaction to that?
Yeah, you put your finger on something which is absolutely critical, and that is China is no longer authoritarian, as we often say. It's really going back to full-on totalitarianism. This point system that you talk about in terms of Xi Jinping's ideological musings, this is going to go into the nationwide social credit system, which they hope to have in place by next year, probably going to be 2021 or 2022. But they hope to give everybody in China an constantly updated score about not only their jaywalking, but also their knowledge of Xi Jinping thought. They'll have 626 million surveillance cameras in place next year. They are enforcing this rigorously. And as you say, you no longer need somebody actually sitting in the hallway to figure out what's going on. They'll be able to do this with artificial intelligence and their surveillance system and their nationwide social credit system. And by the way, Laura, just one more thing. We learned yesterday that Microsoft cooperated with the Chinese National University of Defense Technology on artificial intelligence. This university is directly controlled by the Central Military Commission. This is Microsoft helping China with facial recognition, which will be used for their nationwide social credit system.
So our precious jewel of a company, Microsoft, is now facilitating the monitoring of people within communist China. So
yes, and we also got to remember that artificial intelligence, it's not just Microsoft, it's also Google with its Google AI Center in Beijing, also with its partnerships with various Chinese universities, and Google is trying to get into a quantum computing center in Anhui province, directly connected with the People's Liberation Army, where there will be probably AI work done as well.
Now, why is our government allowing this? Why is this even allowed? And who could stop it? I mean, who is this? Is a State Department technology transfer issue? I mean, how do we get more attention on this?
Well, first of all, we get more attention through your podcast and through your talking about this. But the second question you asked was, what do we do about it? I think obviously we need legislation, but legislation takes time. So I'd like to see President Trump issue an emergency order prohibiting cooperation of this sort until we can get that legislation in place, because this certainly is a national emergency.
Oh, my gosh. Gordon Chang, we always learn something really important when you come on with us. Thank you so much for joining us, as always. My friends, you're not going to hear these segments anywhere else. I mean, no. These are hard topics, but this affects not just life in America today. This affects whether America exists tomorrow. And that's why we have to understand this. And again, I know I sound like a broken record on China, but I literally have been warning about this since 1998 when I did my MSNBC show. I had segments on technology transfer, supercomputing technology being stolen with Fred Thompson, God rest his soul. And people are like, well, you can't do China as a topic. I was told over and over again at MSNBC. It's so boring. It's not boring to me. Not boring to me at all. I want to remind all of you that the folks at Brush Hero, oh my goodness, we just got our Brush Hero in the Ingraham household. The thing that I've got to say, I hate taking about the patio furniture out for the summer, the spring and summer, is that you have to clean the stuff. And it gets caked with mold and dirt and grime and little stuff from the trees falling up. And you get the Brush Hero. This works wonders on outdoor furniture made in the US of A, which I love. And they were originally just, the Brush Hero product was originally designed for cars and motorcycles. So you want to get stuff off the rims of your tires, stuff that's embedded in your car. Then it was great for that. But now you can use it for grills, tools, virtually anything that it has grime on it. And Brush Hero lives up to, all the accolades, and I'm so happy for the folks at this company. And you just hook it up to a simple garden hose, and it rinses as it scrubs, so it just makes your life so much easier. I cannot stand scrubbing that patio furniture every year, and now I don't have to. It's a great gift, by the way, for Mother's Day or Father's Day, or someone who, you are a motorcyclist, mountain biker, anyone who loves to have clean products that some of them sit outside or spend some time outside. You'll save yourself an enormous amount of time, and just everything looks sparkly and clean. You'll love it. By the way, my listeners get 15% off everything at Brush Hero. Just go to brushhero.com brushhero.com/pages/Laura. Okay? brushhero.com/pages/Laura. Use the promo code Laura at checkout. Thanks for listening to the best of the Laura Ingraham podcast. We return on the Laura Ingraham podcast, and we've talked a lot today about the power of faith, reflection, having that time to really think about where you are in your life, whether you're measuring up to the expectations you set, maybe at the beginning of the year, maybe expectations you set 5 years ago or that were set by your parents or your faith, and having those moments to just slow down and think. And things hit us in different ways, and revelations come at different points in our lives. And in the political world and in the struggle that we're seeing our country in now, especially on that issue that I've spent so much time on, which is illegal immigration, we've seen a lot of folks dismiss concerns about safety, insecurity, sovereignty. They dismiss them out of hand as these are concerns just raised by people who don't like brown-skinned people. Oh, you're a mean person. You don't want these poor people to come across the border. How dare you? You can't raise issues of safety or gang affiliation or gang warfare brought on by in some part illegal immigration. No, you can't do that. Well, yes, we can. Yes, we were right. And yes, we will continue to discuss these issues. And on the faith question, intersecting with all of this, we came across a really interesting book. Now, it just came out today, and it's called A Latino Gangbanger's Miraculous Escape from a Life of Violence to a New Life in Christ. The author is Casey Diaz, and he joins us now. How he came into this gang, what it's all about, and how he saved himself through the power of Christ, Jesus Christ. He joins us now. Casey, it's good to have you with us.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Casey, for my podcast listeners across the country and across the world, but for those of us who want an inside view on how this gang operates and what it's really all about, you are the perfect person to reveal that to us. So tell us.
Well, it's like any gang that grows in numbers. It becomes very organized, and it becomes more dangerous as the numbers increase. And for me, I got the first taste of it at 11 years old when I was introduced to this gang culture.
So you were 11?
I was 11 years old, yes.
So tell us where you were and how you came into the United States, and then how you got caught up in this world.
So I came to the United States when I was 2 years old. My family came in here legally, and my mother was a seamstress, and she took on 2 jobs, from working from 4 in the morning till 10, 11 at night. And, I have my father, who was a very bad alcoholic, very abusive, both verbally and physically with my mom. So here's this lady that, was trying to put food and a roof over our heads, and she comes home to a beating. And so we settled in what's called the Rampart District of Los Angeles. If you're familiar with the Rampart scandal, that's the district where we landed. And I got introduced at 11 by a local gang member with this gang. And when there's violence at home and there's you're left to grow up by yourself, you're going to need some kind of mentorship. You're going to need someone to lead you. And this gang leader took me under his wing and really taught me the ropes of the streets, and there I was, left to my own demise.
So this was at about 11 years of age, and they offered you what?
They offered me a family, is what initially I thought it was, and it all turned around very quickly for me. My initiation was getting jumped in. There were several gang members that beat you for 13 seconds, and then you got to go out and do something. And for me, it was they took me to go and we caught what we called a rival gang member. We caught him slipping, and this gang leader proceeded to stab the guy, and then gave me the screwdriver and said, "Your turn." And so at 11 years old, my first stabbing was done.
Oh my God! And do you remember how that felt?
It was a very awkward moment. You're 11. I have a 10-year-old, and he has absolutely no clue of that kind of lifestyle. And I'm looking at him at times. I catch myself, and I look at him, and I go, I'm so blessed that he will never see that side of life ever. And for me, in that moment, it was a dark moment. It was, I had witnessed the first triple murder in the backyard of my alley when I was 8 years old, as a man gunned down 3 guys right before my eyes. So you see the violence in the home, and then you see the violence outside of your street. Mm-hmm. And very quickly you think, this is how you handle life, and life becomes very cheap at that moment.
Well, it's disposable. Doesn't mean anything. All right, Casey, from the time you did that first stabbing to the time where you were arrested by authorities, give us a brief look into that period.
So you have different ranking systems within the gang. And you have your down line where these are the guys that are absolutely doing nothing. They dress the part, they walk the part, but they really ain't. They're not involved in the gang violence part of it. And for me, because I was getting coached by a gang leader, it was a hands-on thing. And so I was driven to the violence, and I started to, and as horrible as it sounds, I started to like the violent part of this gang.
So you enjoyed the feeling of having power over others? Was that what the allure was, or was it the status combination?
I think it was a combination of both. The fear that people have towards you, the respect, the sweet respect that you get. And it's a bad thing to get caught up in, but that every gang, and it's within MS-13, it's within every organized gang that's out there, you are driven by the pride, by the respect, and the causing of fear on the lives of anybody that crosses your path.
If it's the one thing that drove you into the arms of the gang, would it come right down to family abuse?
I would find out later on in life that I would picture my father. Me and him had a rough time, growing up, because obviously you're seeing your mom being beat brutally, and so I would find out later on in life that, and I knew this, but I had counseling and all that. That's court appointed. I would put the face of my father on every single one of my rival gang members that I ended up stabbing.
So you were acting out the rage that you were building up at home,
That's correct.
on the street. Well,
That's correct.
This is a story, sadly, that's been repeated millions of times around the world, in the United States, and different gangs, different pathologies. And all education begins in the home. All values are taught in the home. The most important values are taught in the home, and it's a toxic combination. I mean, so you teach a kid violence as the solution, and a child will oftentimes replicate that out in public or in his own marriage, and that's just beyond tragic. So tell us about your ultimate arrest, and then what happened.
At 16, I committed murder. I was found guilty of killing a rival gang member from 18th Street, and I was sentenced to 12 years, 8 months. Now, back then in the 80s, if you ended up getting a murder charge, you were only getting, 7 years. I've seen cases where they only served 4 years. And California is very upside down in that measure. You know, it was letting violent felons out very quickly. In fact, they were even being sent to the California Youth Authority. But for me, at that moment, at that time, California decided that they were going to see how young could we send a violent offender to state prison. And so I was caught up in the handful of cases where they decided this guy he's fit for state prison. And what they did at that time was that they would send you to the California Youth Authority to see if there was still any hope for rehabilitation. And in my case, the violence just got bigger and bigger. And while I was in the Youth Authority, I was caught strangling another 18th Street gang member and brutally beating him. And at that point, CYA decided this guy is not made for the YA system, and I was sent to the men's central jail for them to pursue sending me directly to state prison.
And how old were you when you went into the men's prison?
I was about 18 and some change.
And then how did you come to meet Christ?
So this little church, it wasn't some big church. It was a little small church that came in to solitary confinement to spread the gospel. I had absolutely no sense of religion. I had no knowledge of who Jesus was or the Bible or anything like that. I wasn't interested in that. You know, I was already involved in organized crime at that time within New Folsom State Prison. And so that was, you know, it was an issue that I never pursued or talked about. And it was at that moment that this lady by the name of Frances would come in there once a month with this Bible study. And she asked the guards if she could approach my cell. And the COs, the correctional officers, discouraged her from approaching my cell. And she asked very boldly if she could approach that cell. And I didn't know that they were talking about me at this moment until the guard said to her, that's Diaz in that cell. You're wasting your time, but go ahead and you can approach his cell. And she came and you know, she invited me to this Bible study. She said, you know, I understand that, you know, you still have to be in chains coming into this Bible study, but at least you're out of your cell for the duration of the Bible study. And I refused. I turned her down. And she said something very colorful at that time. She said, I'm going to put you on my hit list. And what she meant was her prayer hit list. And I thought those are some choice words for her to use in a place like that.
With you?
She said,
wow.
Yeah. So, you know, I said, you can do whatever you want. And she says, I'm going to pray for you. And Jesus is going to use you. And there was this immense amount of conviction in her voice. And that for 12 months later, you know, more than that actually, every month, that one time that she came in there, she would stop in my cell and she would always finish her conversation with, I'm praying for you and Jesus is going to use you. I had absolutely nothing. I didn't know what was going to happen after that. But I had a moment in my cell in which, you know, I speak about in the book. I won't go into details with that, but it was an encounter that was God with myself that made me just. It made it very hard for me to continue in the lifestyle that I was in, and so I took a measure of stepping down from my leadership as a shot caller while I was in there, and immediately a hit was placed on my life for doing so, and it was a tough 2 years that were ahead of me.
We're talking to Casey Diaz, who is a convicted murderer. His new book, A Latino Gangbanger's Miraculous Escape from a Life of Violence to a New Life in Christ. Casey, this kind of sounds like in a way, like a movie script, doesn't it? I mean, the stories of redemption are what great literature and great poems and great music, great films are often made of. And one person took an interest in you. One. And Frances was compelled to take an interest in you because of her faith. And that was her calling. And now what do you find your calling is after having been approached by a woman who could have walked right by your cell?
You know, I've had the opportunity to speak across the United States and in my church in Los Angeles, and I've been able to just be part of lives that are young. That think, you know, when you're 16, you think you know everything.
Oh yeah, I remember.
You feel, yeah, you know. So those are the kind of teens that I like approaching. I've youth pastored for 8.5 years, and then I worked with young adults for another 5 years, and then I planted a church in California, and you know, God has me. This is the very unique thing is that God right now has me speaking to a lot of businessmen and the common citizen, and you know, this is a place where God has me, and God's using me to bring as many as I can through His help to the Lord, and I'm overwhelmed by God's favor and His mercy and His second chance.
Do you ever keep in touch? Casey, with any of your former fellow inmates, people who are still in prison or are out?
No, you know, I that's the interesting part is that you would think that God would have me going back to prison and reaching those, but God hasn't had me do that. I have, however, led the guy that took my place when I stepped down from leadership. I lost contact with him for 15 years, and he showed up at my sign shop. I have a sign shop outside the ministry, and I was able to lead an organized gang leader to Christ there, and he's doing great in his own life right now. It's been over a decade that he's been clean and going to church and everything. So, you know, I try to keep an arm's length from that kind of environment, and for, you know, various reasons. But God has me in a place where I'm just discipling the normal person, and I'm trying to do whatever God wants me to do in this moment in my life.
What are your thoughts on the issue at the border right now? And it's not the subject of your book, but we're now finding, of course, that MS-13 has brought in a significant number of people across the border in the just crush of people who just want to come and work here and live here. And, of course, that's added to the difficulty in dealing with the gangs we already have in the United States. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, you know, and here's the interesting part of that. You know, I love our president. I love your show. I watch your show quite often, and I think that when we do our homework and we see the numbers of people trying to come in here, look, I understand that people are trying to come in here to seek for a better opportunity, to look for to seek a dream. But there's a right way and a wrong way to doing this, and not everyone in these caravans, for instance, not everyone in these caravans are coming here to pick our apples. That's the bottom line. That's the truth. And there's a lot of gang activity hidden within these caravans, and I know that. And the reason I know that is because I was in meetings before my conversion where we discussed movements of large amounts of drugs and and everything. So when these gang members are disguising themselves in these caravans, they're coming in here with a plan, and they have a plan in mind, and they have a plan to execute. They have a plan to cause chaos, and they're not moving into suburbs. They're not moving into. I listen to a lot of these journalists and stuff, and they're also letting open borders, but they're not. What they don't realize is that they're not moving into their neighborhood. They're moving into low-income housing, and their plan is to engage with young 11-year-olds.
Oh yeah,
and they're gonna go ahead and recruit. They're gonna recruit from the middle school all the way to high school, and by that time we've lost a handful of American lives.
Oh no!
And so it is so important to pay attention to what our president is saying, and doing something about that. And if he says let's close the border, then we need to close the border period. It's that serious. And,
Casey, are you in Casey, I'm sorry to interrupt, but you're in LA, right? You're in the LA area?
Yes.
Next time I'm out there, and I hope I'm out there fairly soon. Next time I'm out there, let's get together and have a meal and talk. I bet some stuff we can do together, all right? Would you like to do that?
I would love to do that. That would be an honor.
I want to meet your family.
Oh, wow.
I want to meet the fam. How many kids do you have?
I have 3.
3? What are their ages?
I have one in a private university. She's about to turn 19.
Wow.
I have one. The other 2 are in private schools, and so I got 2 girls. One's about to be graduate from her high school, and then I have a 10-year-old boy, Jacob.
Well, I bet you have them on the straight and narrow. I can bet that right now. I bet those kids are. You're studying. You better be home by curfew, or that's it. I can't. I mean, right. now knowing given where you were, there is no way that you're gonna be like, yeah, come home whenever you want. Yeah, I don't think so.
No, there's none of that. No,
I don't think so. Hey, Casey, I love the book. You turned a life of depravity and crime and killing into a life where you're shedding light. And I mean, this is why we're Christians. This is why we believe, because like as the song goes, once was lost and now I'm found. I love this book. I love the fact that you're speaking out, and keep doing it. And we'll see you out in LA. Okay.
Well, thank you so much, Laura. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Absolutely. We'll definitely continue the conversation. Casey Diaz, the book, A Latino Gangbanger's Miraculous Escape from a Life of Violence to a New Life in Christ. It's on our website, lauraingraham.com. It'll be on Facebook. And this is an issue, sadly, that's not going away. The scourge of this gang and what it's doing to our communities, our youth, and what we can do to stop this. Remember, it all starts in the family. Always does. That was an incredible interview with Casey Diaz. Talk about chilling. Oh, my goodness. Is incredible. Life of crime to life of Christ. If you've enjoyed this podcast, and I know you're enjoying it, remember, our great sponsors, phenomenal products that I actually use, like our friends at Chamonix, who make the Genucel line of products. Double chin, sagging jawlines, come on, skin around your neck, those are the real problems. Until now, introducing the new Genucel jawline treatment formulated with MDL technologies. This Mother's Day, don't miss Genucel's outrageous Mother's Day sale. Robin from Lubbock, Texas loves it. She said she put that jawline cream on her neck 2 or 3 days ago. It's the best her neck has looked in years. Several people told her her face looks better, looks younger. She's blown away. Love hearing the comments. Sure, expensive treatments, you could get those, or gosh, harsh treatments, you don't want those. To look younger, none of that. Come on, guys, why would you do that? From now until Mother's Day, the Genucel jawline treatment is yours absolutely free when you order the Genucel Classic for under eye bags and puffiness. Has instant effects. You'll see the results fast, guaranteed, or your money back. Go to Genucel.com. That's Genucel.com. Or just text EYES1 to 77453. And a special surprise, a premium Mother's Day gift with all orders. Text EYES1 to 77453 or visit Genucel.com. That's Genucel.com. Oh, by the way, Pluto TV is the leading free streaming television service. You watch over 100 TV channels and thousands of movies on demand, all for free. No credit card needed, no sign up. Pluto TV is the easy and completely legal way to watch your favorite TV shows and hit movies. So what are you waiting for? Never pay for TV again. Download Pluto TV for free on all of your favorite devices today. I hope you're enjoying this. The Laura Ingraham Podcast. This is the best of. And thank you for listening. We love your feedback. Always love your opinions. Want to hear from you. So you can email the show at ingram.podcast@gmail.com. That's ingram.podcast@gmail.com. Email me with your thoughts, or if you want to get on the show, just email me the topic you want to talk about or react to the topic we're tweeting or Facebooking out. ingram.podcast@gmail.com. Keep the comments coming.
A new report shows the U.S. birth rate is the lowest in 30 years. At age 40, freelance writer Jennifer Chesick is happy with her decision not to have children.
I love the spontaneity of being able to go and do what I want to do. I love work. I'm kind of like a workaholic. I think I just had a lot of other aspirations in mind. I mean, babies are a lot of work.
Well, I'll attest to that. They are a lot of work. That's true. Interesting dynamic that we're seeing in the United States with a couple of different big factors adding to this dynamic where people are having fewer children and the birth rate is declining as well. What is this all about? Is it personal decisions or is it environmental? Is it just the way the society is today? Are we becoming more selfish and more self-centered? We all tend to be self-centered, but is it worse today than it was, let's say, 25 years ago, 30 years ago? If the fertility rate goes down, if our population ultimately birth rate begins to decline, we would then find ourselves at some point in a situation like Russia is in, where your civilization is basically evaporating over time. You don't replenish the population. You're listening to the Laura Ingraham podcast, big issues, funny issues, cultural issues, political issues. We're tackling a lot today. And as always, you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook, and you can keep up to date with the topics that we're covering, and you'll be able to participate in these podcasts every day when you want it, when you like the topics. We thought we'd bring on someone who's written about this and studied this and wrote a really interesting piece a few months back in the Federalist. Lyman Stone is a fellow at the Institute for Family Studies, and he's been looking at this fertility trend. He used to work as an economist at the U.S. Department of Agriculture, so he's that background as well, and we thought we'd find out what the heck's going on here. Lyman, how are you? Good to talk to you.
I'm well. How are you?
I'm very well. The impulse when you hear a soundbite like that from someone who's 40 is to judge the person, like make a judgment, which is not helpful, I don't think. I mean, what is that going to get us? It's not going to get us to any real conclusions about this. That's one person. People make all sorts of decisions and decide what to do, what they want with their own lives. Conservatives don't want government to tell people they have to have a certain number of kids. Absolutely. But tell us what the foundational story is right now when it comes to our population, because I remember back in the 70s, Lyman, when I was a kid, I remember hearing about the world population, and gosh, we're going to have so many people, we don't have enough room for them, and they painted all these...
The population
bomb. The time bomb of the population. Yeah. And so what's the real scoop here?
Well, the scoop is that we diffused the bomb, that fertility fell around the world, but one place that it didn't fall as much was in the United States, actually. American fertility remained comparatively high versus other developed countries. That has now changed really in the last 10 years. We've gone from being one of the highest fertility countries in the developed world to below average, and we are still falling faster than other countries. The average number of births that a woman has fallen from about 2.1 in America, which we consider replacement rate, so it can sustain the population, to now we're at about 1.7 kids per woman and still falling. And in some parts of the U.S., it's considerably lower than that. Puerto Rico, fertility is at 1 child per woman. So it can go quite low. We don't know quite what the bottom will be yet.
Well, yeah, we have a vibrant economy. Maybe we'll see some changes there. Some people cite economic reasons for not having children, and I hear this a lot when I talk to my friends in their 20s, just gotten married, like, well, we want to have 2 kids or 3 kids, and I said, well, I'm looking at it from a different perspective in life, but I wish I could have more kids. I wish if I were in a different situation, I was younger, and I would love to have 5, 6, 7 kids. It's just fun. Life is more fun with more kids. That's my personal opinion.
And that opinion is shared by most Americans. The average number of kids that most Americans say they want to have, or that they consider ideal to have, is actually rising. People aren't turning against having children on average. Now, yeah, you get some people who are prioritizing having a totally child-free life, but they're basically being compensated for by people on the other side who want to have bigger families. So we're not seeing people turn away from the idea of having children in principle. we're seeing what we might call distractions and obstacles and hurdles along the way to achieving those ideals. And that can include economic factors, like you said. It can also include cultural ones.
Like what? Give me some examples.
Well, the simplest thing is about marriage. The main driver of reduced fertility is delayed and reduced marriage. That is, if we know that you're married, then we know you're way more likely to have a child in a given year than an unmarried person of the same age, race, and educational background. Being married makes people baby crazy.
So with the decline of marriage, you have fewer kids. So you have fewer kids, fewer marriages, declining birth rate. You also have, of course, contraception. The rise of contraception, the rise of chemical abortion, the rise of the implants, hormone implants that prevent women and even men from being able to have children, father children. So some of those are more
influential than others. There's been a lot of research on the historic introduction of contraception, and its effects are actually a lot smaller than the Planned Parenthood advertising would lead you to believe. Most of the historic decline in American fertility wasn't due to changes in contraception. Now, where we do see a change now is, like you mentioned,
I don't get that though. Yeah, Lamon, I don't get that though, because when people, like my mother had me when she was 45, 46, and I was a quote mistake, right? Yeah. So now a lot of people are like, well, just get rid of that.
Sure.
I mean,
there's a simple way we can test this.
Yeah.
Different places had access to birth control to the pill back in the 60s and 70s at different times. The rollout didn't all happen at once. And so what economists have done is they've looked, well, okay, when the pill started to arrive in a place because it was now prescribable and there was actually the government supported prescribing of the pill and continues to, we can ask, well, okay, what effect does it have on fertility? And what we can see is the fertility decline in places that got the pill later was actually pretty similar to places that got the pill earlier. Now, it did have some effect. It wasn't no effect. But most of the decline was because Americans changed their values. That is, people actually said they wanted fewer children.
Yeah, so a more libertine society, a less traditional. Let's just get down to brass tacks here. If you move away from traditional family structures, you're going to have fewer kids, correct? If once family is kind of fungible and does modern family, different families, two fathers, three fathers, two moms, one mom like me. I mean, then it's just a different deal. I mean, it's just you're going to not have the traditional big families. And I would say there are a lot of people who look down on big families. There's a bias against big families. Every time you say you have big family, people look at you like you're a freak. Instead of, it used to be the other way around. If you were not married by the time you were 50 or 40, you were the outlier. I mean, a freak, but you were the outlier. Now it's that's weird.
Changing family structure is a huge part of this story.
I want to play a soundbite. Hold on. I want to play a soundbite before we let you go. Dr. Hans-Peter Kohler, this is back in last summer on PBS, saying how this whole low fertility rate thing ain't no big thing.
The U.S. stood out among high-income countries as one that had relatively high fertility. And the Great Recession changed that, and across many high-income countries, the recession resulted in declining fertility rates. The really surprising part is that we've now been quite some years through the recession and unemployment rates is very low, and that trend hasn't changed. So these low fertility rates, despite relatively good economic conditions, are really surprising. I wouldn't argue that they're a disaster or particularly worrisome. I would argue that the U.S. demographics in general continue to be relatively healthy, at least compared to many other high-income countries.
So not a disaster. Do you agree?
No, I do not agree. Healthy relative to other high-income countries is an incredibly low bar. If you look at the long-run demographic projections for most of, say, Southern Europe or even actually much of Northern Europe as well, saying we're going to do better than the train wreck that is on display there is not saying much. Our better performance will nonetheless necessitate massive changes to our long-run obligations like Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. It will drastically increase inequality. It will reduce social mobility. It will reduce dynamism and innovation in the economy. We will be looking at serious negative consequences. And that's the consensus of essentially every piece of economic research that has attempted to explore this question.
Is there a rainbow at the end of the horizon here? I mean, is there any way out of this?
Is there a way out of it? Sure. I mean, the way out is have more kids. So how do we do that? Well, one way is there is an economic story here. Yes, employment has improved, but household net worth has not. If you look at the net worth of young families, it hasn't recovered. There's been no recovery in young people's net worth since the recession, and net worth matters more than
huge.
employment.
Yeah, that's huge. So also wages, though. If wages go up, which a lot of these libertarians don't like rising wages because they want to keep bringing new people into the country to keep wages low. They don't really like the idea of rising wages. But if you have rising wages, people are more optimistic. People are more likely to probably want to have bigger families.
Well, we would hope it would work that way, but in practice, it's not quite so simple, right? So rising wages, they can free up a family's budget. But what they don't do is, but the other effect that they have is that they make losing that income even harder.
Yeah, I see your point.
Right?
You become
the
more
opportunity
selfish.
cost rises as well.
You become more selfish. You don't want to take the time off from work, especially if you're a woman. You're making good money. The idea of staying home and taking care of kids, which a lot of women still would like to do for some period of time, maybe becomes more difficult.
Well, a majority of women say they'd like to spend at least part of their life as a full-time homemaker.
But getting to the point of this, how do we change the way people think about this then? I mean, it seems like we need as much as anything, a spiritual renewal in the country as well as education about why this is not good overall. I mean, people are going to act in self-interested ways. People always have throughout the course of human history.
So I would say that there's sort of three angles of attack here, and they basically amount to community, education, and then sort of just policy, right? So the first one is community. We can talk about people. They should get married, they should have kids, all these things. We can talk and talk and talk, but that doesn't mean anything. What actually means something is stepping up and doing something. Culture and community is not about what you say, it's about what you do. So if we say people should have kids, but we never offer to babysit the infants and children of families that just had their first or their second kid, then we're not serious, right? You've got to actually step up. Your church should be doing these things. Your community should be helping young families, should be helping young people meet each other, helping young people get married, helping them find suitable housing, helping them manage childbearing. You mentioned family structure. I fully believe that the shift away from the traditional family has reduced fertility. And the traditional family means uncles, aunts, grandparents, the person across the street, the person down the road that you know. At the end of the day, the nuclear family, meaning just two parents being the sole caretakers of children, that's not how humanity has survived for thousands of years. No, you're right. That's not how God intended it.
I always say this to my brother Jimmy. I say, I just wish we all lived near each other. I wish it was easier. I have friends who live near their family. My friends in Minnesota, their brothers, their parents. They have the grandkids there. They all live within, and I joke about it. I'm like, I can't even imagine that. They all live. It's the Wheatons, David Wheaton's family.
They still live in the village.
They all live within maybe 5 miles of each other, and they love it. No, but they love it, and it really is a healthy dynamic. And I'm jealous of people who have that. I don't have that. I have friends. My friends are my family, but I do have the means, which is I'm blessed to have that, and I do have really good friends who have given me really great advice, and sometimes when I haven't listened to it, I've made big mistakes, but I'm really lucky. But not most people don't have that luxury. That's a luxury, which is a real problem. This is just such a fascinating topic, and I think, again, it goes back to what we as individuals are willing to give to each other, and that's goes back to our faith and our if you're Christian or you're whatever your faith happens to be, if you're Jewish, we are called to be better stewards of what's around us in our immediate, vicinity. And I think, we all can do better at that. Hey, thank you so much, Lyman. Really interesting piece you wrote, and really interesting trend that we hope we can actually, by shedding some light on it, maybe we can see some improvement over time. You're listening to the Laura Ingraham Show. I guess what the bottom line is, just have more babies. Have more babies.
Mm-hmm.
You're married, have more. I tell all my producers, when you get married, don't say we're going to have babies in our 30s. Start having kids right away if you can. It's just better. I just think it's better than trying to put it off and shooting yourself up with chemicals. America, now and forever, you're listening to the best of the Laura Ingraham podcast.
Any of you ever question your body because of what you see on social media?
I've been so focused on just not eating past 7 and drinking water. On Instagram, I follow people like Kendall Jenner and Kylie Jenner, and they all have this time measure, body image that everyone is expecting from this generation. So I have a lot of self-confidence. I don't hate my body, but I always feel that there's room for improvement all the time.
Do any of you ever feel criticized and hurt by things that are said on social media?
Yes.
What kinds of things might somebody say that's mean?
They could talk about things that you post, things that you wear, things that you say. I've seen a lot of bullying happen on Snapchat, to be exact, with some of my friends, some people calling them fat, even me, talking about body image.
You're listening to the Laura Ingraham podcast. Delighted you're with us. This is our maiden voyage, and you'll be able to find us on podcast1.com, also your iTunes podcast feature. You can subscribe, and the episodes will drop right into your email, which is really fun. And, man, we're all dealing with this issue. You're confronted with this issue of young people, their phones, their lack of connectedness to everything around them, their surroundings, their immediate experiences, friends, family. And this is an issue that, it's not going away unless they just implant the phone into the side of your face, and then you don't have to hold it up, I guess. But otherwise, it's going to be here for some time to come. And the issue of teen depression, anxiety, bullying, we can't overstate how important it is for all of us as Americans, as parents, or maybe you're a grandparent listening to this, to try to make sense of how we got here and how we can maybe take some control back from what these devices have done to us, what we've allowed them to do to us. Joining us now, Dr. Jean Twenge. She's a psychology professor at San Diego State University, author of iGen, Why Today's Super Connected Kids Are Growing Up Less Rebellious, More Tolerant, Less Happy, and Completely Unprepared for Adulthood, and what that means for the rest of us. And so much of what she's written and spoken about over the years is a lot of it, sadly, coming to fruition. Dr. Twenge, great to have you on. Thanks so much for joining us on the podcast. Man, you made the debut. You must be pretty special.
I don't know if I want to go there, but thank you for having me.
Absolutely. This is an issue that has probably only gotten worse since your book came out. And with all the convenience that screens bring into our lives, you heard from those students in this AP report of last week of what they're confronted with in our world of screens. As a psychology professor and everything you've researched and studied, what are the warning signs today, especially with the teen brain and how it develops, of real pathology developing from the screens that are around us?
Yeah, so I've been doing this work on generational differences for a long time, about 25 years, and I get used to seeing, interesting generational differences, but they would usually take some time to get there. And around 2011 or 2012, I started to notice much larger shifts. So in particular around mental health. So all of a sudden, more and more teens started to say they felt left out, that they felt lonely, that they more started to fit the criteria for having major depressive disorder, that's clinical level depression. The CDC recently reported a tripling of emergency room visits for self-harm behaviors like cutting among young girls. So we have this really, I think you can't even argue with this. This is a mental health crisis. This is pretty much unprecedented to have such a large increase in mental health issues among the young population in such a short period of time. And I don't think the timing is coincidental because 2011, 2012, that's right as smartphones became common, and it's right as social media moved from something that was kind of optional for teens to being almost mandatory.
Well, right now, parents, I think, are becoming at least more aware of how, especially, I think young girls are extremely vulnerable, even more so than the boys on the cyberbullying because of, girls, the mean girl syndrome and so forth. But I think parents at least are now beginning to realize that they can't put their heads in the sand because they don't know or don't have an Instagram account or have never used Snapchat, but at least they know those things exist now. And I think they're beginning to come to terms with this, or am I exhibiting some wishful thinking here? Maybe it's because I've already had to deal with this issue.
Well, I think there's certainly been more discussion around this issue just in the last few years. But I think it runs the gamut. There are some parents who are like, well, I'm on my phone all the time, so why shouldn't my kid be? And no big deal. This is just how kids live now. And then there's the opposite perspective, which somewhat ironically is the way a lot of Silicon Valley families live, which is, let's get away from this. No social media, no phones until kids are at least, say, 16 or even older.
And when they do that, they tend to be better prepared to deal with the onslaught of what will be coming at them through the screen because their brain is more developed. See, I think 16 is right in the sweet spot of developmental, precariousness. I think 16 is too young.
Yeah. So that's the thing. There's a lot of varying opinions on the age, and of course, it also depends on family situations and the particular kid. But what's shocking to me is how common social media is at a very, very developmentally fraught age, which is middle school and even younger. There are 7-year-olds who have their own account on Musical.ly, which is the social media app that's most popular with elementary school kids. And then there's lots of 11 and 12-year-olds who have their own social media accounts. And what's especially interesting about that is it's actually the law that you have to be 13 years old to have your own social media account, yet that's never enforced.
Well, so parents go ahead and do that. Raymond Arroyo is also with us.
Doctor, what would you recommend to parents? What are the 5 things they absolutely should do? I mean, it sounds like you're for restricting usage of these devices and certainly access to some of these more popular sites until the child is well into their teens.
Well, I think there's a number of things that parents can do. So the age restriction is just one of them. We can start there. So first, at least follow the law and no social media account in your own name before you're 13 years old. And then beyond that, maybe even longer. Same thing with having your own smartphone. I'm now hearing stories of second graders, even first graders who have their own smartphone. The average age to get your first smartphone is now 10. And I think that's clearly too young to hand a child a device which has so much potential for abuse, not just in terms of what they may stumble across, but also in terms of how much time they're likely to spend on it. So there's a growing movement among parents to wait until 8th grade or even later to have them get phones. And I think there's really no absolute need for a kid to have her own smartphone until they start driving. I think that makes some sense at that point to have a smartphone, or at least a flip phone. That's the compromise position. And
right.
Not quite as dangerous.
That's a great idea. Doctor, the other thing I see all the time, not when I'm at home in New Orleans, but when I'm in Virginia, when I'm in Maryland, when I'm traveling the country, at restaurants, parents often give the children, and I'm talking toddlers, these iPads to keep them, to keep their attention. So they're watching videos or they're playing little games where they're moving things around or just doodling. What does that do developmentally to a young child's mind? And is that desirable at that early age to expose them to those devices?
We don't know yet what effect that has. From what we do know, I can tell you what I think is likely, which is there's probably going to be an effect on attention span. And teachers tell me they're already seeing that among kindergartners.
My family of teachers have said that they saw it from the beginning, and people who started 25 years ago as teachers. My sister-in-law, my brother's a teacher. She just retired, but she said from the time she started until the time she retired, it is a stunning change in the ability to track and follow what the teacher is saying without looking down.
Mm-hmm. Right, because most of the time what kids and teens do on devices, and a lot of adults too, you switch tasks really, really, really quickly, like every few seconds. And they're catnip, we have these dopamine responses, whether it's social media or a game, and they're designed to keep us engaged at every moment. So we spend as much time as possible on the app because that's how these companies make more money. And then you try to go into a classroom or read a book. It's really, really difficult to concentrate when your brain has gotten so used to switching every couple seconds.
Right.
Now, students themselves have seemed to yearn, Dr. Twangy, for simpler times. And it was striking to listen to this AP report because, contrary to what we might think, that students want more, they even know that this has begun to get really out of hand. Let's listen.
What about relationships, dating, and guys?
I'm an avid 80s movie fan, and I wish that things could be the way that they were in the 80s movies.
What is it that they had in the 80s that you don't see so much now?
Having to actually make effort, and now I think that with things like sending a message, people say things that they don't mean, things get lost in translation.
So you want people to talk more?
Yeah.
We have talked about this, Raymond and I, Dr. Twangy, over the years. Raymond has kids that are in that dating age. Mine aren't yet, and I've heard from other parents. It's a wild and woolly world out there now with texting, because they text each other, and some of the other weird things is people are older on that, on those weird hookup sites and so forth. But just that putting yourself out there to ask a girl out, to come to a dance, pick up the phone and talk. I don't know. Do kids call each other and talk anymore? Not really. What does that mean?
Not really. So yeah, it's mostly done Snapchat and texting. And you're right. That's the thing. It's not in real time most of the time. You don't have to put yourself out there and then see the immediate reaction. It's also very anxiety provoking because then you have to wait for a response. There's also just how are they going to develop social skills? That's what I hear from managers when I talk to them about the youngest hires that they're making. They'll say, iGen, they have a lot of strengths, they have a good work ethic, but they'll almost always say that I'm surprised at how many will not look me in the eye. And they don't have the social skills that we're going to need them to have for the jobs we're hiring.
You know what else? What is odd, given how quick phones make reaction. People react so quickly on phones to things. They don't think, as that student said. They don't think. They just post. They don't think. Is sometimes when you speak to younger folks who are always on the phone, there's a slow reaction time. Raymond and I have noticed this, and I've hired over the years hundreds and hundreds of people, without a doubt, hundreds of interns. Like, hello, are you there? Like, it's almost like without hitting the button, they can't process the words. It's weird.
Well, doctor, you're talking to it. You're speaking
weird.
About reading human cues.
Yes.
Eye motions, the facial cues. All of that is lost. In fact, it's an interesting question. A friend of mine who's a casting director told me a few weeks ago, we were having the conversation, she's finding when they have to bring young actors in, the young actors take her triple the time to cast because they don't have that facial skill, that human skill of just being able to exchange emotions and react. So they look beautiful, beautiful kids, but they can't. They don't have that facility because they're not exercising it every day.
Yeah, there's an interesting study that looked at this. Took sixth graders, so 11, 12-year-olds, and half of them went to a camp for 5 days with no devices, and the other half didn't. And I bet you can guess which group at the end of that, just 5 days, was better able to read emotion cues on other people's faces. Of course, it was the group who had the 5 days without screens.
That is fascinating.
Wow.
Well, they're forced into interaction. You have to.
But you know what else you find? You find you're happier. I find, and
Yes.
I'm now it's my own, focusing on yourself, your personal experience. But when I leave screens, and it's usually when I'm hiking. Even when I'm hiking, I've used screens, which is another story. But when I really had to go to Africa, and now even that's changed because you can get cell phone service in parts of Africa, like where I was before, where it was remote, you couldn't. But I was happiest then. I feel like kind of nostalgic, Doctor, for that period of time where you didn't have the excuse to go to your phone. You truly could be disconnected. So again, the great irony of being connected makes you feel less in the moment, less present, present in what you're experiencing, feeling. Even at concerts. I love when someone's performing at a concert, an artist, a performer, singer, songwriter. Put your cell phones down. I don't want to see a screen. Put them down. Because you're not looking at me. You're looking at me through a screen. That's not me. Right. I'm me here. Don't look at me through a screen. Look at me. Mm-hmm. Listen. Use your ears. You're depriving yourself of the senses.
Correct.
And I do believe people end up, after their withdrawal symptoms are over, the shakes. So are there actually withdrawal symptoms from smartphone cutoff, Doctor?
Deprivation?
Yeah, so that's another thing. Research hasn't really caught up with people's everyday experience yet. There's a few studies that have asked people, say, to give up Facebook for a week or so. But that might be still having those withdrawal symptoms after a week. We don't have a lot of long-term studies yet to know, for sure what the effects are. But, just anecdotally, stories like yours are extremely common, even among iGen, even among younger people who you'd think would be even more attached to the phone. Some of them do describe that withdrawal symptom, feeling shaky when they can't get to their phone. But a lot of them also say, hey, my teacher gave me this assignment. I had to put down my phone for an hour and go out in nature. And they love it. And they love having a break. And they say it's a relief. So there's these kind of mixed emotions, like these withdrawal things of like, I'm supposed to be checking my email. I'm supposed to be seeing if I get any texts. I'm seeing if, what's going on Instagram. But then on the other hand, there's this feeling of relief, like, hey, I'm free now. I can actually pay attention to what's going on around me.
There was a school that my children went to. They attended middle school there, and it was very retro in the sense that you had to take notes. There were no devices allowed in the room. They had to write everything by hand. The assignments were turned in. But that is not the norm in schools anymore. They love the online, everybody's got a Chromebook, everybody's got their pad. I guess because it makes grading easier, the conveyance of information, there's less paper. But there is something to be said about the tactile experience. No, Doctor?
I think that's an issue. I think the even bigger issue is the distraction issue. Uh-huh. So this is what I hear from parents and students themselves all the time. But my assignments are online. And then that means that if, say, especially an assignment that requires them, to be on the internet, especially if you're iGen, you grew up, switching tasks and stuff, you're trying to focus on writing your essay or whatever, and then you have the text coming in, and then you have, all the temptation to go online and look something up. And you look something up, and then you see an ad for,
right.
20 pictures of celebrities who had horrible plastic surgery, and then 2 hours later you're like, oh, I didn't write my essay.
Yeah, and then you go down a black hole of click, 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 and then for little kids, they're sometimes in a really dark places really fast. Which leads me to the question of, and we're going to devote an entire probably show to this later on, but pornography is still the biggest seller on the internet as a commodity. And it's available for free. It's available even darker and darker pornography. Kids, especially boys, are so susceptible to this. And no longer do you go to, read your father's Playboy hidden under the bed somewhere. You're clicking through to interactive, disturbing live chats with women and men and That is so heartbreaking to me, for the innocence of little children and what they envision as normal or intimacy. It's warped.
Yeah, and this is another huge problem. You know, it's not just having the phone in your hand all the time. It's all the stuff that's out there. And there's at least one survey to suggest that the average age when boys are exposed to pornography online for the first time is 9. So this is just, they're getting exposed to this stuff at younger and younger ages, and it warps exactly what you're saying. It warps their perception of what adult relationships and adult sexuality is like. And that seems to already be having some impacts among particularly young men in their 20s. And, you know, anecdotally in the reports of what a lot of young women are saying about what young men expect from sex these days. And then the other thing that is somewhat unexpected is also an increasing percentage of both young men and young women who are not having sex. And some people think that might be because they're watching pornography instead.
And then when they're married, they can't have a normal, you know, sex life, and they're caught into this web of, well, it's dysfunction. It's dysfunction delivered to their handheld device.
Well, it creates artificial expectations of what a woman is, what a man is, what, and naturally the true intimacy can't compete with it. And then there are certain chemicals that are released as well, Doctor, isn't it? When you know, I've read a lot of studies when boys first encounter this, and predominantly it's boys, that the chemicals are released that change the wiring in their brain and their pleasure receptors.
Yeah, so there's a lot of implications here, and you know, this growth of pornography tends to disconnect sex from emotional intimacy, and where you really see that is on college campuses, where the norm is what used to be called a one-night stand is now sometimes called a hookup.
God, one night would be a long-term relationship, Dr. Swain.
Right, exactly.
Now, if you're into 1 hour, it's a long-term commitment online.
And it's not even just the short amount of time. It's that, so sociologists have studied this about the sex life on campus these days, and the standard is for sex that does not involve emotions, which just blows my mind, is this idea that's the standard, that's the expectation, and that, what you're never supposed to be is somebody who wants to have, more closeness. That's described, the word they use is thirsty, and that kind of means what clingy used to mean. And what that actually means is you actually want somebody to love you and have a closer relationship with them. There's another phrase on college campuses, it's called catching feelings. Like, oh, you have a hookup partner and you caught feelings for them, as if feeling love or affection is a disease.
Yeah. Meanwhile, they're the ones catching diseases. They're in this kind of disconnected.
Sometimes quite literally.
Yeah. No. This is. Well, look. The only way to kind of get through it is for us to have our eyes wide open. You can't wish it away. You have to know what's out there.
Not
and you
the
have
Nicole Kidman, Tom Cruise way.
No.
Okay, go ahead. I'm old enough to remember that reference.
Yeah, you can't wish it away. You have to confront the world as it is, and figure out a way to preserve your core values, understanding that we're all flawed, we're all gonna make mistakes. But especially when you're raising kids or giving even your adult kids advice about how to deal with their kids as a grandparent, there are warning signs all around you flashing red. And when there's a red light, you got to stop. When there's a yellow light, you got to go really slowly and look around you before you proceed. But we have to get through it together. I mean, this is where it kind of does take a village. As a single mom, I can say my friends have really helped me think this through with my own kids, and I've made some mistakes. And I mean, I cried some afternoons, like making mistakes, leaving a tablet around my house that kids could get into. I cried. I'm like, oh my God, what did they see? And I was so upset. And you have to forgive yourself if you fall down and try to do better. But this is a great conversation. Dr. Twangy, thank you so much. Gene Twangy here on the Laura Ingraham Show wrote a seminal book called iGen about growing up in this connected world. We really appreciate it, Dr. Twangy. Come back soon, would you please?
Sounds good.